Making Big Shifts, presented by Marketing Reboot, with your host, Josh Anderson.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Making Big Shifts by Marketing Reboot. I'm your host, Josh Anderson, where we talk to real entrepreneurs making really big shifts and the real results that followed. Today, we have author Brandon Tidd here. He is a solutions architect and author of the 10,000 minute, not hour, mindset, how a week an AI can change the way you think, create, and grow. So welcome to the podcast, Brandon.
Happy to be here.
Well, Brandon, before we jump into this book, and I know I have a lot of questions of 10,000 minutes versus 10,000 hours. Of course, that's a normal question probably people ask, but give me a little bit about your background and how we came to this book.
Yeah, so I am a recovering sales rep. Spent my days working with mostly small businesses in radio and digital sales. And right around the time the pandemic hit, I realized that I didn't really enjoy the hustle of sales culture, but I really did enjoy consulting. So I went into software architecture and software consulting full time. A year later is when ChatGPT came out, and I knew almost immediately that the world had changed and that nothing was ever going to be the same again.
Yeah.
And so I started leaning really heavily into generative AI and trying to understand it from all aspects. And the more I used it, the more I realized it was really an accelerator. And that's really where the idea of the book was born.
Awesome. So obviously it's a timely subject, right? Of course, because it was right whenever I was coming out. So just give me the 10,000 version of what the book is about. Then we can dive in a little more.
Yeah, for sure. So Malcolm Gladwell in Outliers popularized the term 10,000 hour mindset, or that there are 10,000 hours to fame and mastery. Essentially saying you needed to spend 10,000 hours with a discipline to become a true master of that craft. And to a certain extent, that's still true. What I realized pretty early on was that AI act as an accelerant, that you couldn't become a master, but you could definitely become functionally competent in about 10,000 minutes. And I'm like, well, wait, 10,000 minutes works out to, if you reverse engineer the math, about 1 week. It's plus or minus 80 minutes, but we'll let it slide. So the idea is that you spend 1 week of focused effort intentionally looking at a topic with the augmentation of AI as the wind in your sails. You can become functionally competent in that topic. And then you have to figure out, is that something that you want to invest 10,000 hours of your life in?
Love it. So this is just the precursor to the 10,000 hours, essentially, right? This is where you're kind of shifting through what you want to be that expert in, right?
Exactly.
Nice. So let's talk about, like, as I'm looking through this book here, in the description, it says this is not another tech manual, it's a mind shift change. So let's get into that. What are people needing to shift in their mind anyway? I realized we just talked about the 10,000 hours versus 10,000 minutes, but in terms of AI, what shift are we looking to change here?
Yeah. So in the people that I talk to, one of the recurring themes is a limiting belief of, well, I'm not X. I'm not an artist. I'm not a playwright. I'm not an author. Full disclosure, I wasn't an author until I was. Nobody is anything until they are. And so by leveraging AI, it democratizes the knowledge gap that allows you to learn anything, to do anything, to become anything, with the obvious limitations. I mean, you can't just go and become an astronaut in 1 week, right? But you can decide if the astronaut lifestyle is something that you would aspire to be, and it could point you in the right direction. But in terms of creative mindset, a lot of people shed that creative gene somewhere in middle school and they never get it back. So one of my mentors calls this the revenge of the liberal arts majors, because we finally have our moment to shine.
That's great. I love the limit, like the limiting factor you're talking about, and removing that through democratization of all this information. That's awesome. How do you go about doing this? I know the book is kind of crafted around this craft framework, right? So can you kind of dive into that?
Yeah. So the craft framework is a principle that gives you a framework for thinking through the iterative process that is working with AI. But before we get there, I do want to back up to one other element of this that's critically important, is the principles of the 3 Ps. And that is how you decide what you're going to study and what you're going to learn. Because a lot of times the limiting belief isn't that I can't, it's just that I don't know what I want. I don't know what I do. It's paralysis by analysis. So we introduce early on the concept of the 3 Ps when you're trying to think of what you're trying to accomplish and what you want to do, what you're going to spend your 10,000 minutes invested in, you want to make sure it's passionate, that you have passion for it, that it is portable, that you can move it from discipline to discipline. So, I mean, you can go 10,000 minutes deep on one specific tool, but we want to make sure that if there's a skill that you're learning, it could work across multiple disciplines. And the payoff has to be there. The payoff doesn't necessarily need to be monetization. It could be purely a feel good or I helped somebody. But there has to be a payoff at the end. Otherwise, there is no finish line that's worth racing for. So passion, payoff, portability. And once you have those three, then you can start to hone in what you want to spend your 10,000 minutes on. And that's where we get into the craft framework.
Yeah, that's great. Obviously, passion is very important. Like, I like the idea of the portability, right? It's got to be applicable across different areas, like you were just mentioning. I think that's huge. And some people you wouldn't think about, right? Because, like, for instance, I might be passionate about, I don't know, I'm just thinking I love medieval history. So sometimes that's not portable in terms of like where I can take that, right? So I think that's a great or a great 3P process.
Yeah. And so historically, we've looked at education as through the lens of a staircase. I'm taking one step at a time. I'm learning, I'm synthesizing that data, and I'm building functionally and linearly. AI is like an elevator. It's just you can jump in at any point, get off at any floor, but you have to have some sort of guardrails around that. And that's really where that craft framework comes in. So it's an acronym. So it breaks down to clarify. We're going to clarify what it is. And that's really where those three P's come into play. And then you want to refine. So you're going to take that initial clarification and you're going to boil it down and continue to hone in on it, because the first idea that you have is going to be kind of a moonshot idea. Well, I want to learn Spanish. Great. Why do you want to learn Spanish? Are you planning a trip? Like, there's got to be something beyond the actual learning that is driving that awareness. And then you take a time out and assess that and say, and that's the A, is assess, is, okay, now that I have an idea and I've refined it down, is that actually something I want to do? Or was I just doing it for the sake of doing it? And that's where you have to gut check it. And that's the F, that's feel. You have to feel like this is something that is going to be of benefit to you long term, because otherwise the motivation is just going to go down the toilet. And then T is track, and that you track that result and you check in with yourself over time as you go through not only the first 10,000 minutes, but if you decide to stick with it and go something bigger and better, you always want to check in and make sure that what you're working towards is in alignment with what goal you set when you were in clarify and refine.
Love it. Yeah, that's a great framework that keeps you on track for sure. But then I guess my question goes to, and I guess you can even use AI to ask this question, but like, what is the curriculum, or what are you going to study during those 10,000 hours or 10,000 minutes, excuse me, to become that expert, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's going to be very discipline specific, and AI can definitely help you bridge that. A Notebook LM is from Google, and it is a free resource that is phenomenal at gathering data, doing deep research, and translating it into digestible bites, whether you listen to audio overviews or you want to make a slideshow, whatever your flashcards, whatever your modality of learning is, you can take those tools and those resources and bring them into Notebook LM and work with AI, be it ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or Meta, insert your model of choice here. You can just say, I have a week to become functionally competent in this topic. Create a syllabus for me. And it will do it. It has to align with what you want it to be and what you want to get out of it. Tell it that. I'm planning a trip to Spain in 2 months. I need to be able to have a base of communication in Spanish. Great. Here's a coursework and a framework that can get you there. Or I want to write a book. I don't have to write a book in a week, but I want to be able to feel comfortable with the concepts of writing a book. Great. Here's how you spend that 10,000 minutes.
Love it. And then, so say you're successful after 10,000 minutes and you went through the craft framework, of course, and you're still passionate about it. What's the next step to taking you from 10,000 minutes to 10,000 hours? I mean, I'm guessing you can just ask AI that too, right? To help you build that and become a master set subject. Hey, sorry to interrupt the podcast really quick. If you're getting value from making big shifts, please subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the next conversation. All right. Appreciate it. And now back to the podcast.
Yeah. And so, for me personally, I am a jack of all trades, master of none. except for maybe a couple that I hold close. But for the most part, I am genuinely a pretty curious person. And so I like surface level learning. I'm a
Yeah.
big fan of becoming functionally competent on a topic and then just saying, okay, I checked that box. I scratched that itch. I'm moving on to the next topic. So for me, my 10,000 minute mindset is really a series of sprints that are unrelated. But for anybody who's looking to go deep, it's cumulative. So you take your first 10,000 minutes and then you maybe stack on another 10,000 minutes. So the interest of writing a book, everybody's got a story to tell. Everybody I've ever talked to says, I want to write a book someday. But most people never do because they don't have the ability. Well, now with Kindle Direct Publishing, I was on another podcast and it was a teach and go, and we did a prompt to publish in 26 minutes. We took a blank ChatGPT screen to a published Kindle book. Granted, it was what some people would consider AI slop. We didn't refine it. We didn't go through the craft process. We didn't spend 10,000 minutes. We spent 26 minutes, but it was to prove the point that it could be done. And we ended up with a little 5-chapter kids book that my 8 and 5-year-old really enjoy reading. And so it's like that story didn't exist 30 minutes ago, and now it does. It exists in the world. And so you could take that and say, I'm going to spend my first 10,000 minutes learning how to do this, learning what the framework is. Then I'm going to spend my next 10,000 minutes actually drafting something and working and collaborating with AI, using AI as that mentor, as that partner, as that copy editor to tease ideas off of, to brainstorm, to hone. And obviously everybody's going to come to it from a different place. Some people are going to be out of work and they're trying to level up their skill set to acquire a new position. There's going to be other people who are comfortable in their full-time job, but really have a creative itch that they're looking to scratch. And that's the beauty of this framework, is it works across disciplines, and it really doesn't matter where you're starting or where your entry point is. You can come in and take a week. I mean, a week, 2 weeks. I'm not sitting here with a stopwatch. You take a functional, spirited sprint of time and you can become functionally competent in whatever it is that you want to pursue.
Nice. And I kind of think I relate to you in terms of like I love a high level or, surface level education. So I would have like my 10,000 minutes planned out in a series of this and then this and then this, like different unrelated subjects all across. Kind of going into, this might be in the nuts and bolts of it, but what are your best prompting secrets that you use for this?
Yeah. It's a really great question. So there's a lot of noise out there right now in the marketplace about prompt engineering and, the single greatest prompt you'll ever need. And here are the 10 prompts that are guaranteeing financial freedom. At the
I
end of
see
the
the new thing
day,
on LinkedIn every single day about that, right?
exactly. And so what it comes down to is that you are collaborating with all of humanity. So when you're talking to the large language models, you are essentially collaborating with the sum of human knowledge. And as much as it is a engine of predictability, it's trying to generate predictive text based on what you said before. And it's really good at that mathematically, but it's also inherently human. So my best advice for working with a large language model is to treat it like an enthusiastic intern that just got hired at your company, or an executive assistant that just got brought in and was gifted to you and saying, I'm going to run fast and hard and be as passionate as I can, but I don't know anything about who you are or what you're trying to do. And so just like at a company, you wouldn't trust your intern on their first day with the quarterly financial report. You're going to want to ease into that relationship. But the context windows, the memory of these things are getting so good now that whatever your model of choice is, be it Gemini or Claude or ChatGPT, once you start talking to it and communicating with it just as a human, as a confidant, as a friend, as a go-to iterator of ideas, it's going to learn you. It's going to learn your voice. It's going to learn your tone. It's going to learn how you function and how you receive information, and it's going to adapt accordingly because it's trying to predict what's going to work in this conversation. And if this conversation's happening with you, then the more likely it is going to be reflecting back parts of your personality at you as a mirror. And so the best advice I can give is just be authentically you in these prompts and That way, the responses that you get will act as an accelerant for your style of communication and your style of learning. If you try to copy somebody else's perfect prompt, it might not be your perfect prompt. And so it will fall flat. And then you say, well, AI doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work for you because you didn't use a prompt that wasn't authentically yours.
Ah, I love that for sure. That's great. Now it makes me ask a question though, because as we start to use our personal assistants, over the course of years, who I was 2 years ago talking to my ChatGPT is going to be completely different than who I am in 2 years in terms of like where I'm going, learning, knowledge, things of that nature, even where I'm at in life. Now, this is a random question, but should there be some memory cleanup over time in terms of like, like my conversations from 2 years ago? I don't want that to still be referenced by GPT 5 years down the road. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. And it's an interesting theory, and there's a couple of trains of thoughts on it. Some people like to keep their memory pruned. They'll go in there and they'll do laser removal and line item veto certain memories. Like, I don't want you to remember that. My rule of thumb is that all of the large language models have a temporary chat, an incognito, or a private chat option. If I don't want the AI to remember or to clock that particular conversation, I'll have it in a siloed window. I'll have it in that, I'll turn on that temporary chat mode and it won't influence. Because the reality is, especially if you're talking to it every day, if you're leveraging it every day for work, for home, for business, for life, it's going to learn your cadence. And that data is going to be extrapolated across hundreds, thousands of conversations. So there isn't any one thing that you said. I mean, maybe there's one thing in a moment of weakness you say something that's completely out of pocket and you don't want it to remember that, like, that's not who I was. You don't even have to go back. You could just say, hey, remember that? I don't want you to remember that. Can you forget that? And it will actually go through and say, oh, Josh doesn't want to remember the time that he called me an idiot because he was just had a low blood sugar that day. So always say please and thank you, because how you do anything is how you do everything. So I
I do.
always
I do.
try
I,
to,
I think yes, I think about that.
yeah,
I love that advice. I'm thinking more along the lines of like somebody that's like for me, for example, I create frameworks and principles around marketing consulting and some of the things I do, right? But those change over time as I get more educated. Some framework, for example, like your craft framework may be changed 10 years down the road, right? That's where I'm like thinking about be like, hey, ChatGPT, remember 3 years ago when I first introduced this? I guess you can just tell it to forget that area, can't you?
you can. And as of right now, this is a temporary problem, but as of right now, all of the AI seems to have a limit of about a year where things start to get really fuzzy after about a year. And that emulates human. Like if you think about, if I ask you, what was that work project that you worked on 3 years ago? You're like, hang on, let me go look on OneDrive and see if I can pull up the exact framework because I don't remember it because it was so long ago in the past. They do weight recency and relevancy differently. So it's not pulling in equal measure, like, oh, well, you said this 3 years ago and you said this 2 weeks ago. Those two things are contradictory. So now I'm just going to hallucinate and make up a third thing that you never talked about. More so, it's going to be like, okay, we use elements of this thing that you talked about 3 years ago, but because you've been using AI as a collaboration tool for the past 3 years, it's right there with you through that
Yeah, you can
revolution
bring it
and
up. Yeah.
through that iteration. And so it's keeping track of all of that. And it's going to remember that, this is where you came from, but it's not who you are today.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. What is your tool of choice for if you're doing this 10,000 minutes yourself? Do you have a certain one that you lean more towards?
Yeah, I flip between ChatGPT and Gemini personally, and Gemini being Google's. ChatGPT knows me the best, but Google, I'm embedded in their ecosystem. So photos, my Drive documents, my calendar, my Gmail, it's all in the Google ecosystem. So if I'm looking for something that is personally relevant, I tend to lean on Gemini because it knows me because it has access to all my information. If I'm looking for something to assist in like the first draft of a blog post where I'm trying to ideate through ideas. I've got to write a blog post for work about something and I need, 10,000 words. Give ChatGPT the topic and say, okay, in my tone of voice, because you've gotten samples of my writing, I gave you a copy of the 10,000 minute mindset to read. You know how I write. Go ahead and draft this. And then obviously I'll go back through and fine tune it, tweak it, read it, edit it, and make it and polish it before I turn it over to our content team. But ChatGPT knows my voice well enough to emulate it really well in written form.
Yeah, for sure. That's kind of what I do as well, by the way. Well, have you have I'm sure people talk to you about their 10,000 minute transformation. Are you hearing people like going through this and like because it could really change somebody's trajectory of life, right? If they want to learn something and then they go from 10,000 minutes to 10,000 hours. So heard some of those success stories?
Yeah, early on, I mean, the book just came out November, so we're still early on in getting feedback like that. But a couple of the folks that I'm close to that read it told me that it unlocked something for them, and it felt like they could give themselves permission to try. And to me, that's the win. If you can just give yourself permission to invest 10,000 minutes, I mean, we think about how much time we spend doom scrolling on social media or taking care of mundane tasks,
Yeah.
or heck, even in your daily commute, driving back and forth between your office and home, you could throw one of these things into voice mode and spend 10,000 minutes
Totally.
talking to it over your
Yeah.
Bluetooth speaker. So it doesn't take much to go into that 10,000 minute mindset. Oftentimes it's just that permission to start that people need.
Yeah. I love that. That's actually a major blocker of people for sure. Where can people find? Obviously, I've already mentioned Amazon, but where can people find the 10,000 minute mindset?
Yeah, so it is on Amazon in both Kindle and paperback. I also had 11 Labs, which is another AI platform that does voice synthesizing. I
Yep.
fed 11 Labs the PDF copy of the book, and there is an AI version of it that's an audiobook format. So if you're into audiobooks and want to listen to audiobook format, you can download that through 11 Labs Reader program. And you can always reach out to me. I'm one of the few Brandon Tids in the world, so I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn and on the socials. And so happy to continue the conversation. I always love hearing from people and love talking to folks about their journey and where they're at with life and with AI.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's why I started the podcast for, really, just to talk, just to have these conversations. So I do want to say I love the title. That's a marketing perspective. 10,000 hours playing off the 10,000 hour thing. That's a brilliant title. So well done there.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, we released it on November 30th, which was the 3-year anniversary of ChatGPT.
Everything happens for a reason.
Exactly.
Any last parting pieces of advice? I mean, so you gave some great one-liners here. Anything else you'd like to tell the reader or the viewers or listeners here?
Yeah, I would say that we are entering into uncharted waters with AI. Over the past few years, AI has kind of been playing on the sideline where we've been like, oh, that's cool. It made an image that kind of looks like me, except I'm dead in the eyes. We're moving past that now to the point that it's starting to get really good at things that we get paid to do. And that's going to present a problem for a whole host of problems, or for a whole host of people rather. So I would say the best advice I can give you is get into communities. The one that I run alongside is the AI Salon. It's community.thesalon.ai. And that's where I work with a bunch of people to really understand what's happening. And that I'm borrowing this from that community, but the pillars of foundation for that community are play first, create excellence, and generously lead. So if you can start with just playing, don't try to over architect it. Just spend your first 10,000 minutes learning how to write a song in Suno, or learning how to create an image with Nano Banana. One of our favorite pastimes is I'll take a picture of my daughter and her friends, and I'll upload it to Gemini and say, make this into a coloring page, but reimagine it as them hanging out at the beach. And it'll create this beautiful black and white photo that we can print out and then they can take in color. So little things like that give you opportunities to see what's possible. And then your brain will naturally start saying, well, if I could do it there, I wonder if I could do it for that marketing campaign at work where we've got that kids event coming up. And you can start to see where the connections get made. And from there, you start honing your craft.
Yeah, that's awesome. I do have to ask you more of a trendy, timelier question. I see it all over the place. Maybe not so much this week, but the previous weeks about the death of software as a service, right, due to AI. What's your take on that?
Well, as somebody who configures and trains on software as a service, it's a little bit nerve wracking to hear them holding the signs or see them holding the signs that say the sky is falling.
Yeah, yeah,
In my opinion, the industry as a whole is going to pivot into hyper local, hyper personalized service, but you still need to have people that have guardrails around that. You still have to have companies that are knowing how to authentically show up in that space in a safe capacity. So the Zendesks of the world, the Disneys and the Ubers of the world, they are still going to churn out software that is best in class. Whereas there's going to be a bunch of other ankle biters, I think, for
Totally.
the SMBs and the single seat startups that didn't have the resources to pull in those big ticket software packages like Salesforce. You could very easily vibe code your way into a CRM that's going to do exponentially better for you than Google Spreadsheets will alone. But once you're ready to play at that next level, there's still a functions gap and a configuration gap. That's where the software architects of the world and the software developers of the world can use these tools like Cursor and Claude Code to accelerate their timelines to be able to bring more software as a service to the lower tier customers that were, historically locked out of playing in that space because of price.
Good to hear. I like that take. And then I also think, to your points on these lower tier things, I think that with as fast as development can happen now, I realize I don't know everything about it, but feedback can be integrated more quickly as well within like these smaller tiers as well. So it should be a win-win for everybody, I would hope.
Yeah, Lovable is the one that I go to for rapid deployment and rapid testing. So Lovable is a vibe coding platform where it's, somebody I heard on another podcast said that English is the new programming language.
That's crazy.
And it
That's
is
another good one-liner that we can. Yeah, that's gold. That makes sense though, right? Interesting. Because I'm like, I would say not even on vibe coding, but 75% of the time I'm actually dictating to ChatGPT. I'm not even typing anymore hardly. So
Yep.
the written
Yeah.
English language too, even. So or the
And this
spoken.
is the worst it's ever going to be.
Yeah, which is crazy. Only up from here. So, all right, Brandon, this has been delightful. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast and sharing this knowledge. And best of luck with the book, the 10,000 minute mindset.
Thank you.
All right, guys. I appreciate you guys listening in. For everybody here at Making Big Shifts, we'll see you next time. Hey, guys. Thanks so much for listening to Making Big Shifts by Marketing Reboot. It would be a huge help to us if you subscribe to the channel and share this with somebody that you think needs it. Your support helps us continue to bring great guests on board and keep the conversation going. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Making Big Shifts. Like, share, and follow for more. Join us next time on Making Big Shifts, presented by Marketing Reboot,